students feel about themselves. So why is my line of research important? There's a lot of research out there saying that, Kurzweil is great in improving reading achievement, or that this specific program not only improves reading achievement, but it provides a variety of other effects. So there's lots of research out there outlining research on specific programs and the effect that they may have, but there's not any research published at this point on the benefits of these computer programs on the way students feel about themselves. And in terms of that statement, I spoke with Dr. Eddie Byrne last summer at an AT for All conference, so I don't know as of August 2009 if there's been any, perhaps new literature, but at that point, there's no published literature examining the effects of these computer programs on students' self-beliefs. So I'm going to present 3 studies. The first study is building on the research from my master's, as well as a follow-up study. And the third study I'll perhaps only have time to touch on briefly, because it's currently in process. So again, I wanted to focus on students who were at the demonstration school, and I wanted to focus on students right when they got there, because I wanted to see what happens when students had intensive use of the technology. Does that change the way they feel about themselves over a course of a year? And one of the things I found out when working with the students, I wanted to survey them to see what their past experience of AT was. So for the large majority of the students that I worked with, they may have had a C-funded computer, but they may not have had enough training or experience using it to use it well. So not to go too much through the research methodology, but I worked with 20 or so students. I interviewed them on an individual basis. I typed up the interviews, coded them to see what types of themes are coming out, had a peer review them to see that, this isn't just one thing that Gabrielle's coming up with, it's actually evidence in the research literature. And any time there was a disagreement in terms of what I was finding, we kind of talked it out through discussion just to actually confirm this is actually what we were finding. So I'm not going to read all these quotes, but I think it's really important to share what students have to say about using the technology. So 87% of these students said that the technology helps me to read. Right? It reads to me, and I can't really read. And not only that, when I can do my math, I can have the computer read the questions back to me. So it helps in a variety of ways, not just in terms of their language-based subjects, but being able to have an exam where the questions are read so that students can demonstrate what they know. Students indicated that was beneficial for them. I talked to teachers as well, and what teachers said that students, not that they didn't like to read, is that the text was previously inaccessible to them. You can tell this is a few years ago because students were at that point reading Harry Potter. Perhaps now it's Twilight or the Twihard fans. But for students in grade 9, watching their younger peers read and them not being able to do that, that had a really negative impact on the way they felt about themselves. So being able to access to the text was something that students said was of great value to them. Equally, 87% of the students, so perhaps maybe not the same students, but the large majority of students, again, said the technology helped with their writing. Students had a variety of reasons for this, but just some of the selected excerpts said that, with the technology, you can describe things a lot better when you can talk it out, as opposed to having to think and then write it down, right? And to describe this a little further, students said that sometimes they became so focused on spelling the word, having neat handwriting, so they didn't have that baby-style printing. So much focus was there that they would lose the train of their thoughts and not be able to express the words according to their vocabulary that they were actually able to use. So being able to speak into a headphone that types out for them, students said that was highly beneficial. Students said it was easier as well as faster to use the technology. For parents in the audience, you may know that the homework struggle is a big issue, right? So being able to do the homework independently in a short period of time, students felt relieved that they were able to do that and get it done. The technology, extremely helpful. If not, they'd be like last year, wouldn't be able to keep it up, and students would say, and it piles up and up and up, and it became to the point where the homework was so overwhelming for the students that they just gave up, couldn't cope, couldn't do it. So students said that being able to, do their homework independently, greatly beneficial. All the students noted that the technology impacted their academic achievement. They're really proud to say that they were able to do grade level work with the use of technology. And they recognized that it didn't just help them, but it assisted all the students in their class. Now this is what I was really interested in. I asked questions like, are there things that you can do with the technology that you perhaps couldn't do before? And if so, how does this make you feel about yourself? Right? Students said, it makes me feel happier. I was never before able to write a paragraph. Now I can write 3 pages. The technology helps students to increase their self-confidence. They felt confidence both in their reading abilities, and that evidenced itself in their willingness to answer questions in class as well and demonstrate their true knowledge. Students commented that the use of technology increased their self-esteem. Students said, I have a better view of myself, my self-esteem goes up, and I don't feel like an idiot. Man, I can do this and I can have fun doing it in the process. Students did use those derogatory terms when referring to themselves, but again, they mentioned that the technology helped to alleviate those negative feelings. And teachers agreed with those comments as well. So not only did I use interviews with those 20 students, but I also used 2 surveys, the first being the PIAD, Psychosocial Impact of Assistive Devices Scales, and this is a tool to measure the impact of any type of assistive device. So there's 3 scales in total in this scale, and they can be used from a point. Students would rank their responses on a Likert scale from -3 to +3, with -3 being a strong negative impact versus a strong positive impact. So I'm looking at the means, the averages of that group of first-year students. Students indicated that as a whole, there was a strong impact. The technology had a strong impact on both their competence in the classroom and their adaptability, their ability to do new tasks in the classroom. And not only that, the survey demonstrated that technology did have a immediate effect on their self-esteem. I also used another scale designed specifically for students with learning disabilities. And this scale was used, the self-perception profile for learning disabled students. This was used to gauge students' level of self-esteem. So not to go over the data in too much detail, but because of the delays in getting ethical approval, I wasn't actually in the schools until October. So this was my master's research, and of course I wanted to finish up in a timely manner. So I administered those surveys in October, as well as in the start of January, towards their second semester. And I wanted to see, is there a change in the way students felt about themselves from when they were first admitted to that demonstration school program to when they had been there for a while and were really competent in feeling successful in their use of the technology. So what I found was that although students' global self-esteem, how they felt about themselves as a whole, didn't change, over that 3-month period, students said that they felt smarter. They felt that their intelligence level had increased because of what they were able to demonstrate. And again, that was a significant statistical finding. So I found that to be a little bit puzzling. So I didn't necessarily expect that the use of technology would have an impact on how students felt about themselves as a whole, but I thought, there should be some type of impact in terms of their reading ability, their spelling ability, their writing ability. Why was it that this information was coming out in the interviews, but I wasn't seeing it in the surveys? So what I did was I went back to the schools, actually went back to the ethics committee first and asked for permission to complete a second study. I went back to the demonstration school and worked with the next bunch of students that were coming into the program. So instead of administering the surveys over a 3-month period of time, I administered the surveys at the beginning of the first year, towards the end of the first year, and at the end of the second year, just to see, if these surveys are administered over a longer period of time, will those changes that students are talking about, will those be evidenced in the surveys as well? So what I found was that students not only felt like over the course of the first year that they felt smarter as a whole, but they felt like their reading ability, writing ability, math, and spelling increased. And this is a statistically significant finding, which just means that the averages from the first test were significantly different from the second test and not likely to be found by chance. So again, I'm not going over the stats in detail, but this survey was assessed from a scale of 1 to 4. So for students to say that, as a whole, they thought they were, at a 2 out of 4, perhaps sort of smart, to the fact that they were fairly intelligent, that's a significant finding. So again, not focusing too much on the stats, but great increases in all academic abilities over 2 years, as well as 3 years. Over from September to May, and as well as 2 years. So great, I had this great experience of talking with students to see how the technology was impacting them while they were at the specific school environment. But I really was interested in seeing, they go to the school for 2 years, they use the technology, they learn to use it well, but what happens when they leave those schools? Are they still using the technology to the degree they were before, or are they perhaps being stigmatized, or feeling like they're stigmatized and not using it to that same level? So at present, for my dissertation research, I'm following students who have left that demonstration school. So they're now all over Southern Ontario, and I'm meeting and interviewing them, both to find out what was the experience for them like at that school, what was the impact of the technology, how it impacted their self-esteem, motivation, and their perceived level of support at that school versus their perceived level of support in their current local high schools. So I've worked with 12 students, interviewed them, both them and their parents. I've interviewed them once, and currently I'm meeting with them for the second time. And I've also administered 4 surveys to try to get a better understanding of what's it like for students leaving this demonstration school and being reintegrated into the local school system. So again, these students all have severe learning disabilities, or they are diagnosed with severe learning disabilities at one point in time. They're achieving 5 or more years below grade level when they are administered to the program, which means they're perhaps, grade 7 students reading at a grade 2 level. It's interesting to note that when they left that school, their reading ability had increased dramatically. So some more things. I asked students the first questions, what do you think about the technology? And again, I am presenting comments that are representative of the students as a whole. The technology, students said that sometimes they were frustrated when, perhaps Dragon wasn't picking up their voice accurately, right? But for the large majority of the students, they really commented that they like the technology. It's easier, and I can do things that I didn't think I was able to do before. Now I have the confidence to say, I can do that, I can get my computer, off I go. One student said, the technology makes everything so much easier. It helps me because if it wasn't for the technology, I couldn't understand my work. If I had to read a story and answer a short question, I couldn't do that. The technology can read it to me, and I can go back, use the highlight tools provided by Kurzweil, and I can get Dragon to answer the questions. So students explained how it benefited them in a variety of ways. Again, that same type of theme makes it easier, right? Students talked about the technology being beneficial in terms of doing research assignments or regular high school assignments. For Dragon, when you're writing a paragraph, it's easier for you to write it out because you can just think it, speak it, and it writes it down. And not only that, students are able to hear auditorily to do their own editing. And they contrasted that to when they did their work by their hands, with a pen and paper, having difficulty speaking, pencil and paper, and not being able to understand their own work that they had written themselves. And again, students said, technology really enables them to express themselves clearly in terms of their spelling and grammar. Makes work faster. Students talked about not wanting to be behind their grade level peers, right? So being able to complete that in-class assignment in the same level of time as their other peers, that was really important to them. Being able to complete their English exam in the allotted amount of time, that was important to these students. Another theme that was coming out, are you still using the technology? If so, how does it make you feel about yourselves? Students said, I feel way better knowing that I can get the same grades as my peers, knowing that I'm just learning differently. So students are able to self-advocate for themselves, saying, I can do this now.